The Supreme Court has come out and struck down a New York state law requiring concealed carry permit holders to have a good reason in order to go and get a concealed carry permit. And the left on this country melted down. So we'll talk just a bit about what was happening there, what this actually means, and what the left is trying to tell you that this means. In other news, the Senate has passed its bipartisan gun control legislation on a 65-33 vote, which means, hey, 65, that means that Republican Party that you trusted to save this country, yeah, that's exactly what they think of you. Some January 6th news came out here, and apparently they've got the smoking gun yet again, so we'll talk just a bit about what's going on there. But let's be completely honest, nobody's really paying attention to this whole thing. And Biden cancels another $6 billion for student debt. It is going to be all this and more. Welcome to midterm season, and welcome to the Meltdown 2. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Oh man, what a day to have a Twitter account yesterday. I can't believe that site is free. Because there's that much entertainment of people who have no idea what's going on. And I can't even just pick on the leftoids at this point. I can't, because there were enough people who were mega, populist, Republican, who were having just as bad a takes yesterday. I'm not going to lie to you. I've looked through this decision. I've looked through everything that's gone background. I haven't read the full decision, like the full text of the decision, but I've looked at the details of it and what it was that got that was used to make the decision. And really, honestly, for most of us out here, outside of the big liberal strongholds, like this affects Fanning. But for the majority of us out here, outside of the, I just spit in my microphone. That's great. That's a great way to start the show. For most of us out here in normal land, this actually doesn't affect us. But what it does do is it keeps states like California, New York, etc. from coming out here and saying, hey, you want to have that concealed carry permit, or the thing with Massachusetts too, that's going to be a big one. If you want to have this gun at all, you got to give us a damn good reason for it. Yeah, that's out the window at this point. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the gun bill that's coming out here. In the wake of all this, I think the Senate tried to sneak this in while everyone was paying attention to the Supreme Court. I caught it. Most of you are going to catch it too, so we'll talk about that. We'll be talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene, because I know that was a big request from Mr. Fanning at the end of the show, and we just could not get to it at the end of the show yesterday. And we'll be looking at live chat too. I've actually got the names of everybody who chatted in the live chat yesterday written down in the handy dandy notebook in bright red ink too. Done by fountain pen. Always by fountain pen. It's all there. We'll say thank you to everybody who chatted here. And we'll actually look into some of your chats from the day as well. Do keep in mind, there's going to be a little bit more discretion. And we started talking about this a couple of weeks ago when I realized that I'm in a position to compete with the AM radio guys. So I got to be a little bit more discretionary. I still appreciate seeing your spicy chats. I just can't read all of them out loud anymore because, yeah, you know, sometimes the parents are going to have the kids in the car and they don't want to hear me say the F word. Well, they don't want the kids to hear me say the F word. I think the parents are cool with it. They just don't want the kids to hear it. So let's get into it. Let's get started. We're going to get into finance first. But before we do, make sure you guys go check out the other creators from the Turn Some Pages Network. I am talking, of course, about the Daily Ignoramus, the Breakdown with Birkenhoff, the R-Rated Conservative, and the Porch Boys. I know that once we get started, I'll also be onloading KTZed and her looks through the criminal justice system. We'll bring those back up right away because we like KTZed around here. And another show will be joining us too as soon as we get out to launch. So go and check that out. turnsofpagesproductions.com. TSP, not TSP. There's no letter esh. TSP-prod.com. Go check that out. Let's get into finance for the day. Let's get the live chat up here. It is live chat day, so I want to make sure I see what you guys are saying, and if I do have to address something at the top of the show, let's get into it, shall we? All right, looking into the Dow, which took a dip through the middle of the day yesterday, and then climbed its way back up to close yet another winning day, closing the day yesterday at 30,677.36 points. I waited too long to get started, so we can't see what the previous was or the percentage was up, but it was a significant gain at least. So it's starting to climb its way back up and claw its way back out. They're trying to say that it's because Jerome Powell said he's not going to crash the economy. He is. He's just not going to crash it on the supply side, on the government side. This is something I have been thinking about as we go, and we'll be talking about Powell in just a moment here. But one of the things that I've realized is everything that the Fed is doing right now is making it harder for you to go start a small business, to go buy a house, to buy a car, to get another credit card. Everything that he's doing out there is making it easier for the government to continue to spend money and do Build Back Better and to do infrastructure plan and make the law and tax and spend and send another $150 million to Ukraine. That did not make it onto the stack just because we were that full, as you can see off the top. But yeah, there's another big stimulus going to Ukraine too. And yet, they want it harder for you to go out and spend money on the things that are important to you. And just the same thing with what we saw yesterday with Jerome Powell saying, oh, well, if we want to get inflation under control, we might have to see 10% unemployment for a year. What do you think that's going to do to the consumer spending market? More government causes you more problems. So we'll see what happens with that and where that goes. Let's grab one on the Bitcoin. Bring that back out for 5 days. And actually, let's refresh that quick, because it looks like it just jumped again. The Bitcoin is up to 21,274 US dollars. That is up over 5 days, 721 US dollars and 60 US cents. 3.5% over the past 5 days. Over just today, it's up actually just about a percentage point as well. So a little bit of a dip there. Those of you who bought the dip, and I didn't get into it unfortunately, but those of you who bought the dip are probably going to start to see a little bit of gain off of this. It's not going to be a major gain. I don't think we're set to 100K just yet. But what we will probably see is probably back in the 40 to 50 range again. So we'll see what happens with that. And we'll continue to track that daily and see where that goes. And remember, Bitcoin, outside of stocks, is probably one of your better indicators of where the economy is at a snapshot, because it's one of the more liquid assets. If people can't afford to buy diapers, the first asset that they have, the first hard asset that they have that goes, is the Bitcoin. Hopefully they're smart enough that the precious metals go last. But the first hard asset that they have that they go with is the Bitcoin, because it's the easiest one to go and get cash back out of. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll see where that goes and what happens there. Let's look at the gas prices. We're starting to see some reprieve. We see the 455 from Lodi and now a 453 from Lodi as well. But what is this in the Sun Prairie, in the immediate Madison area? A 459 at the Woodman's in Sun Prairie. We've got a 460 at Sun Prairie, 460 in DeForest. Another set of 460s in Sun Prairie. And it looks like all of our 464s have fallen off. Now, do keep in mind that this excludes, as of right now, with the way that Gas Buddy's snapshotting, all of Madison proper. So we're actually probably still holding just about steady for the gas prices, but you know, Gas Buddy is making it look really, really pretty and saying, hey, look at this 453 and 455, and hey, a 459. These prices probably do not reflect your immediate area, but they give a good benchmark as to the direction that the markets are going, so we continue to look at them every day and see where it goes. Let's grab one from IBD. Dow futures rise after NASDAQ leads uneven market rally from Ed Carson. Dow futures rose Friday morning along with the S&P and the NASDAQ. The stock market rally attempt made progress Thursday, especially on the NASDAQ, amid some hints that inflation is peaking. Yeah, we've been hearing that since this time last year. But those inflation peaking hints included plunging copper and other commodity prices, which also reflect rising recession risks. Commodity-related stocks were hard hit on Thursday. And one thing to keep in mind when they keep telling you, oh, inflation is peaking, whatever bullshit number they tried to feed you and say, oh, well, we've got it under control. Whether it's 8.4 this coming month, whether it's 8.0, even if it goes down to 7.9. Remember, that is on top of 4.1 from last year. Keep in mind, whatever they do is on an inflation curve that was already accelerating by this point last year. So if you wonder why they keep telling you everything is great and your purchasing power is getting less and less still, that's why. Vertex Pharmaceuticals, United Health, ServiceNow, and Tesla rivals BYD and Li Auto are worth watching, though for different reasons. Vertex and Li Auto cleared 5 points Thursday, while BYD nearly did so. UNH stock is near a breakout. ServiceNow is a long way from old highs, but did take a positive step. Vertex and Li Auto are on the IBD 50. United Health was Thursday's IBD stock of the day. In other news, Zendesk is close to a private equity buyout, the Wall Street Journal reported Thursday night. The buyers include Hellman and Friedman and Permira. Zendesk, which had a $7.1 billion market cap as of Thursday, skyrocketed 52% early on Friday. Several cybersecurity buyouts have taken place over the past year. Meanwhile, Merck is ramping up negotiations for a possible Seagen takeover. Wall Street Journal reported Seagen stock rose 3% overnight. Is it Seagen or Seagen? I'm thinking like C generation. That's why I said Seagen. Rose 3% overnight after jumping on last week on reports of talks. Seagen ended Thursday with $32 billion in valuation. After the close, FedEx reported fiscal fourth quarter, not fourth fiscal year. Fiscal fourth quarter earnings and revenues that just missed analyst views for the shipping giant, but FedEx raised full-year EPS guidance. FedEx stock rose 3% in pre-market trading. Shares dipped 0.4% to 228.13 on Thursday, hitting resistance at their 200-day moving average in recent days. FedEx stock is off early May lows, but has been in a long downtrend. On the futures are up once again. Dow futures were up 0.7% versus fair value. The S&P climbed 0.7%, and the NASDAQ popped 0.8%. The 10-year yield rose 6 points to 3.13, which is still ridiculous, by the way. Crude oil rose more than 1%, but copper slid 1% after plunging in recent days. And remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. So that's what we see coming off of that. That's where that goes. Let's talk a bit about what happened yesterday, and then we will get into the big thing that happened yesterday. By the way, like every other article up on top for a little while, because of them coming out with the receipts and the video and the tweets, whereas the other mainstream outlets wouldn't do that, or the fact that they were the only ones that covered it, is the blaze for a little while. So bear with me as we pay homage to a terrible person, but a good news aggregator, Glenn Beck. But coming back to hits from MarketWatch, Dow went nearly 200 points higher after Powell concludes Capitol Hill testimony with vow to battle inflation. Once again, by taking you and me out of the market. From Joy Wiltermuth and Joseph Adenolfi. Stocks closed higher Thursday after Jerome Powell concluded a second day of congressional testimony with a vow to battle inflation even if it risks a recession. The Dow rose 194.23 points, or 0.6%, and near session highs at 36.76 after flipping between gains and losses. The S&P rose 35.84 points, or 1%. And the NASDAQ increased 179.11 points, or 1.6, closing at 11,232.19. On Wednesday, the Dow fell 47 points, while the S&P and the Nasdaq finished slightly lower. Stocks rose despite concerns about potential sharp economic downturns as the Federal Reserve gets more aggressive in tightening monetary policy. Fed Chair Jerome Powell said Thursday he doesn't think a recession is inevitable, but that he has an unconditional commitment to fight inflation in his second day of testimony to Congress on interest rate policy. It is clear that the Fed doesn't have the markets back anymore, said Anthony Saglimbeni, Ameriprise Financial's global market strategist, of Powell's testimony. Dude, the Fed never had the markets back. In what universe has the Fed ever had the markets back? The Fed is there to make sure that the government gets to do what it wants. You, the people who have a 401k in the market, pish posh on you. I think the Fed is unbothered of slowing growth if it causes a shallow recession. With that, Saglimbeni expects that it'll be a tough summer for stocks with little reason for investors to turn bullish until there's more clarity on where the U.S. inflation is headed and also what's on the Fed's stopping point for rate hikes, he said. Given the jittery backdrop, it was difficult to pinpoint the exact driver of gains. Dip buyers, bottom pickers, quarter-end rebalancing, rotation out of commodities into stocks, pick your favorite, said Mohanad Amma, a portfolio manager at Beam Capital Management. And that's what we're going to see it. Buy the dip, grab it off the bottom, change your quarter end, and, as they said, rotation out of commodities into stocks. Copper is down, which is telling me that there's probably not a whole lot of production going on. Recent talks of recession has brought the yield out of the 10-year down to 3.068% from as high as 3.48% earlier this month. Falling yields can help long-duration assets such as technology stocks and Bitcoin, which rose in early action on Thursday. It's been candid, said Alessio De Longis, senior portfolio manager at Invesco QQQ Trust, of Powell's testimony, noting that he admitted the changes in the Fed faces in trying to tame inflation with higher rates and how seriously they're taking it. Powell has been very honest in assessing that achieving a soft landing is difficult balancing act, De Longis said. So, that's what we see coming off of that. That's what we're going to see coming out of the markets for the day. I don't anticipate a jump above 25K for at least a little while. However, I do see that coming before the midterm. Just so they can say, yay, we fixed the economy, and have a solid, tangible number to get there. Let's get into the main news of the day, what you're probably all here for. And we start today with SCOTUS blog, which is at SCOTUS blog. The Supreme Court strikes down a New York gun control law that required people to show proper cause to get a license to carry a concealed handgun outside the home. The vote is 6-3. And we see the bargaining, the stages of grief that goes with this. Like this friend, A.L. Katz. Can someone please point to the word own in the Second Amendment? It's not there. It isn't in Heller either. I don't know. Keeping and bearing arms seems pretty obvious. And you seem like an idiot. Where does it say that arms equals guns and that keeping equals ownership? Yeah, these people are, like I said with a tweet that I said yesterday, this is the bargaining stage. They realize they have lost, and now they're trying to bargain. And honestly, again, as I said, when I looked into this, and I actually dug into this and scratched below the surface a little bit, for the majority of us watching this, with the exception of our friend Fanning in New York, this isn't really going to affect most of us. I think the vast majority of the audience that watches this show regularly lives in shall issue concealed carry states or an open carry state. This entire thing has to do with may issue. So, That is what we see from that. Let's read a little bit of this from NBC to start with. Supreme Court allows the carrying of firearms in public in major victory for gun rights groups. From Pete Williams. The Supreme Court ruled Thursday that the Constitution provides a right to carry a gun outside the home, issuing a major decision on the meaning of the Second Amendment. The 6-3 ruling was the court's second important decision on the right to keep and bear arms in a landmark 2008 decision. The court had said for the first time the amendment safeguards a person's right to possess firearms, although the decision was limited to keeping guns at home for self-defense. The court has now taken the ruling to the next step after years of ducking the issue and applied the Second Amendment beyond the limits of homeowners' property in a decision that could affect the ability of state and local governments to impose a wide variety of firearms regulations. The decision, which came as Congress advanced the most significant gun violence prevention legislation in almost 30 years, don't worry, we're going to get to that, involved a New York law that required showing special need to get a permit to carry a concealed handgun in public. The state bans carrying handguns openly, but it allows residents to apply for licenses to carry them concealed, which makes absolutely zero sense, by the way. The law at issue said, however, that permits could be granted only to applicants who demonstrated some special need, a requirement that went beyond the general desire for self-protection. Gun owners in the state sued, contending that the requirement made it virtually impossible for ordinary citizens to get the necessary license. They argued that the law turned the Second Amendment into a limited privilege, not a constitutional right. The court agreed with the challengers and struck down the heightened requirements, but it left the door open to allowing states to impose limits on the carrying of guns. The constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense is not a second-class right, subject to an entirely different body of rules, other than the Bill of Rights guarantees, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote in the majority opinion. We know of no other constitutional right that an individual may exercise only after demonstrating to the government officers some special need. In the ruling's most far-reaching language, Thomas said concern for public safety isn't enough to justify new gun controls. The government must affirmatively prove that its firearm regulation is part of the historical tradition that delimits the outer bounds of the right to keep and bear arms, he wrote. Experts on gun law say that part of the ruling sets a high bar for further gun restrictions. In a concurring opinion, joined by Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Brett Kavanaugh said the ruling does not bar the states from imposing licensing requirements for carrying handguns for self-defense, such as fingerprinting, background checks, and mental health records checks. Yeah, but there's going to come to a point where that actually gets into the Fourth and Fifth Amendment. New York's law was problematic because it grants open-ended discretion to licensing officials and authorizes licenses only for those applicants who can show some special need apart from self-defense, in effect denying citizens the right to carry a gun to protect themselves, he wrote. In a dissent joined by Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, Justice Stephen Breyer mentioned recent mass shootings in Uvalde, Texas, Buffalo, New York, and elsewhere, saying it is often unnecessary for the court to consider gun violence in deciding Second Amendment issues. The dangers posed by firearms can take many forms, Breyer wrote. Newspapers report mass shootings occurring at an entertainment district in Philadelphia. 3 dead, 11 injured. An elementary school in Uvalde, 21 dead. A supermarket in Buffalo, 10 dead and 3 injured. A series of spas in Atlanta, Georgia, 8 dead. A busy street in an entertainment district of Dayton, Ohio, 9 dead, 17 injured. That one glows. Well, I'll put the cursor over the rest of these and say glows, 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 doesn't glow, doesn't glow. A nightclub in Orlando, 50 dead, 53 injured. A church in Charleston, South Carolina, 9 dead. A movie theater in Aurora, 12 dead, 50 injured. And an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut, 26 dead, and many, many more. So, first and foremost, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we'll throw the Las Vegas one on there just to make it an even 10. That sounds like a lot, right? Doesn't it? Doesn't that sound like a whole lot? until you sit back and realize that they were reaching for examples going back over 10 years. If you look at the examples that Breyer put out here, Aurora, I think, was 08, wasn't it? Which means that this list of 10 goes back, well, list of 9, plus we added one for the Las Vegas shooting, goes back 14 years. This isn't that major of an issue. And you'll notice the mass shootings they don't mention happen with handguns in drive-bys. I think, if I remember correctly, almost everything here happened with the evil, deadly, scary AR-15, which this law isn't even talking about. They're talking about concealed carry permits. I mean, if you can concealed carry an AR-15, I want to be your friend because you're a walking refrigerator and ain't nobody going to mess with us. With or without you carrying or concealing that AR-15. But this is what we see. Now, as far as what this means. Number one, top level. This means that the may issue side of things has been officially deemed unconstitutional. And again, as I said at the top of the show and as I said at the top of the article, this does not affect me. This doesn't affect the majority of you. In fact, the vast majority of you wouldn't have never noticed this unless the news made a big deal out of it. There wouldn't have had to be a press release in your state. There wouldn't have had to be a change in the laws in your state. There wouldn't have had to been anything in your state except for the fact that the news media and Twitter made a massive deal about this. You would have never known. You would have never seen the difference. But now that we've seen and we know what the difference is, where does this go from here? I know there's already talks, and I've already said, this didn't go far enough. The correct answer from Roberts would have been repeal the NFA and nationwide permitless concealed carry for everybody. We're not there yet, folks. But you wouldn't think that. Like, if you'd have read Twitter yesterday at all, you would have thought that we now have nationwide permitless concealed carry, and criminals can use it just the same as everybody else. So, that is what we see from this. Let's grab one from CNN. Here's what they want you to believe the new gun rights ruling means. From Tierney Sneed. Clarence Thomas opened the floodgates for all sorts of gun safety laws to be challenged in federal court. One thing to keep in mind about challenging in the federal court, it takes a long time. It takes years. It is very likely the next time we get a gun rights case that comes to the Supreme Court, Justice Breyer will not be hearing it. The 6-3 Supreme Court decision, striking down a type of gun carry restriction embraced by only 6 states, will have the effect of making all sorts of regulations across the country vulnerable to a new legal challenge. Thomas changed the test courts are to use when analyzing the constitutionality of such regulations. Only firearm regulations that are consistent with this nation's historical tradition comply with the Second Amendment's protections, he wrote, in an assertion that puts in jeopardy any restrictions that does not have a historical parallel to this nation's founding. The new standard will change the legal playing field around guns. There are already cases in motion where courts will now adjust their approach and raise the threshold that governments will have to overcome in defending their gun safety laws. The ruling will also likely prompt a bevy of new legal challenges, with gun rights proponents now able to push more aggressive arguments for why restrictions should be struck down. Good. Good. Up for grabs is not just public carry laws like the New York regime before the court. Virtually any other type of gun regulations, including age-based regulations, restrictions on certain types of firearms, and limits on high-capacity magazine, will now be viewed by courts in a harsher light. I don't see the downside here. Show me what the downside is for this. In the fallout of the case called District of Columbia versus Heller, a landmark 2008 ruling where the Supreme Court established the Second Amendment protects an individual rights to keep and bear arms, appeals courts across the country had coalesced around a two-step legal approach for analyzing the constitutionality of gun regulation. Lower courts have looked at, first, whether the regulated activity falls within the scope of conduct protected by the Second Amendment. If it did, then they assessed whether the regulation means justified the ends. Despite the popularity, this two-step approach is one step too many, Thomas wrote, calling the second step inconsistent with the Supreme Court's previous gun rights precedents. Instead, the government must affirmatively prove that its firearms regulation is part of the historical tradition that delimits the outer bounds of the right to keep and bear arms, Thomas said. Oh look, they have the handy little chart there in case you forgot. Conservative justice. Liberal justices. Courts are required to assess whether modern firearms regulations are consistent with the Second Amendment's text and historical understanding, Thomas said. For instance, he wrote, if a gun law is addressing a societal platform that existed in the 18th century, it is evidence that the modern law is unconstitutional if there was no similar regulation then. Likewise, he said that if a societal problem was historically addressed using a type of regulation different than one now before a court, that's also evidence that the modern law is unconstitutional. When confronting such present-day firearms regulations, the historical inquiry that courts must conduct will often involve reasoning by analogy, a commonplace task for any lawyer or judge. Like all analogical reasoning, determining whether a historical regulation is a proper analog for a distinctly modern firearm regulation requires determination of whether the two regulations are relevantly similar. Here's the fear porn. What the ruling puts in jeopardy. Thursday's ruling means that for a court to find any type of gun law constitutional, it will have to be consistent with how firearms were regulated historically. That means states and localities will run into legal trouble whenever they try to enact a gun law that doesn't have historical parallel, particularly if the problem the law is trying to address is a problem that arguably has existed for generations. This analysis will apply to the gun law cases that have already been appealed to the Supreme Court, which include challenges to California's ban on magazines holding more than 10 rounds, Maryland's ban on assault weapons, and a challenge to a federal bump stock ban put in place by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which should be a convenience store under former President Trump. The High Court may opt to take up those cases, or it may send them back to lower courts with instructions that the laws are re-examined under Thursday's ruling. The New York decision will also likely affect what happens next in a California case, where the state's prohibition on keeping people under the age of 21 for purchasing certain semi-automatic weapons was struck down by a conservative-leaning Ninth Circuit panel. It may also have implications for a federal gun safety package Congress is poised to pass, and if and when these modest gun safety measures are challenged in a court, which I hope that they are, by the way. I really do. So, here's one, restrictions on sensitive places. Thomas's opinion touched on how courts might view one type of restriction. Restrictions on bringing firearms into sensitive places, as defenders of New York's law pointed to, that is a concern motivating its limits on public carry. Although the historical record yields relatively few 18th and 19th century sensitive places where weapons were altogether prohibited, Example, legislative assemblies, polling places, and courthouses. We are also aware that no disputes regarding the lawfulness of such prohibitions, Thomas said. We therefore can assume it's settled that these locations were sensitive places where arms carrying could be prohibited consistent with the Second Amendment. But regulations for sensitive places that reach beyond those historical parallels might be constitutionally problematic, Thomas's opinion suggested. It is true that sometimes people congregate in sensitive places, and it is likewise true that law enforcement professionals are usually presumptively available in those locations, Thomas said, but expanding the category of sensitive places to simply all places of public congregation that are not isolated from law enforcement defines the category of sensitive places far too broadly. So, I'm going to steelman the gun control people's arguments a little bit off of this, but also point out some of the things that we are seeing off of this. Now, what this does is if you're walking down the sidewalk and you have the concealed carry permit, because remember, your state can still require a permit for this, you're good, but you still have to follow all the same laws that you would have before in your concealed carry. Public building, where, as he pointed out, law enforcement's readily available. I don't like that idea, by the way, either. Excuse me. Like, to the post office, to the courthouse, to the school. Although, if, again, CCW holders were defending the schools, we'd see a lot less of this school shooting nonsense, but regardless, those are all acceptable. And that kind of falls under the private property doctrine, in a sense. It's a stretch to say it, but it kind of does. These are government buildings that are owned by the government, and the owners of the buildings can come out and say, yeah, I don't want armaments in my building. It's pretty simple. And you still have the concept of private property restrictions. Your store. No open or concealed carry allowed in the building. Well, if you concealed carry or open carry in the building, that's trespass. And there are still going to be places that, there are definitely going to be places now that throw that sign up as quickly as they can. We don't want any concealed or open weapons in our store. Or our bank. I can see a lot of banks putting that up, actually. So, a lot of stuff moving and shaking with this one. Let's touch on one from Fox News here for just a moment. Supreme Court gun decision shoots down New York rule that sets high bar for concealed carry licenses. From Ron Blitzer. The Supreme Court Thursday ruled 6-3 that the New York's regulations that made it difficult to obtain a license to carry a concealed handgun were unconstitutionally restrictive, and that it should be easier to obtain such a license. The existing standard required an applicant to show proper cause for seeking a license and allowed New York officials to exercise discretion in determining whether a person has shown enough good reason for needing to carry a firearm. Stating one wished to protect themselves or their property was not enough. In this case, petitioners and respondents agreed that ordinary, law-abiding citizens have a similar right to carry handguns publicly for their self-defense. We too agree, and now hold consistent with Heller and McDonald, that the Second and 14th Amendments protect an individual's right to carry a handgun for self-defense outside the home, Clarence Thomas wrote in the court's opinion, referencing two previous gun cases. Because of the state of New York issues public carry licenses only when the applicant demonstrates a special need for self-defense, we conclude the state's licensing regime violates the Constitution. Now, this is important to what we're talking about. What Clarence Thomas had to say with this, and what's actually at the crux of all this. Now, I have often, and I'll go back to the First Amendment when I talk about this. The most dangerous part of the First Amendment, or repealing the First Amendment, as some people have talked about, is not the fact that your speech is going to go run out and get somebody killed. The dangerous part about this is who decides. Who decides what language is proper? What language is improper? Who decides what's hate speech? What's not hate speech? Who decides what's allowed to be said and what isn't allowed to be said? And what basis did they use to that? Is there a standard across the board, or is it just, I think that you're saying hate speech because you belong to a political party that I don't like? Because you have said something about our dear, great, glorious religious leader president that I don't like. And I would insist, just using the speech example, for an example, still, that while the censorious left would love to keep and censor anything that is demeaning to the religious icon that they have as their president, or the other religious icon that they have as a senator, Bernie Sanders, they would not be very happy if the table got turned off that, or, as the online parlance likes to say, if the shoe was on the other foot, and it was the MAGA people who were deciding what speech was sacrosanct and what speech was vulgar. You understand where I'm going with this? So it's the same thing with the New York state law. Now, who decides whether or not you have the right to defend yourself? Bureaucrats, people who would comb through your social media, people who would see what your voting rights and voting records are, people who would look onto your YouTube channel and see one of those behind you. Oh, this person doesn't want the government to tread on him? Well, he doesn't need to have the ability to carry in public, because he might turn that against us. And it strikes at the very core of what the Second Amendment was supposed to be. So, very important to look at that for the rest of us. Let's grab one from WCVB5, ABC out of Boston. What the Supreme Court decision on New York gun law could mean for Massachusetts. Oh, Massachusetts is screwed. I know what their gun laws are up there. They're screwed. The Supreme Court on Thursday struck down a New York state law that had restricted who could obtain a permit to carry a gun in public. Under the law, in place since 1913, New York residents needed to show proper cause or an actual need to carry a concealed handgun in public for self-defense. New York and a half dozen other states with similar laws now must decide their next steps, as with New York, California, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Rhode Island, all have legislatures controlled by Democrats who could propose measures to ensure guns will not be allowed in certain places. Mass law had given local police chiefs the power to decide whether someone is suitable to have a license to carry a handgun. Police chiefs have been able to deny applicants if they determine that the person would pose a risk to public safety. Like having one of those behind you. For reasons such as a history of domestic violence, those who are denied can appeal to the local district court. The law says those deemed suitable can get a license to carry if they show good reason to fear injury to themselves or their property, or for any other reason, including for use in sport or target practice only. What's considered a good reason has been up to police chiefs, and that's the problem. There's no consistent standard across the board. It's up to discretion. Who vary in what they require of applicants to meet the standard. Some demand that applicants show that they have a reason to fear injury that distinguishes them from the general population in order to get an unrestricted license. Mass courts have ruled that if someone can't show good reason to fear injury, police chiefs can put restrictions on licenses that limit when someone can carry a firearm. State Attorney General Maura Healey said Thursday that she stands by the state's common sense gun laws and will continue to vigorously defend and enforce them. The office has not responded to questions from the Associated Press about what extent Massachusetts law will be affected by the ruling. So, some things to watch for and see with that. But again, this is just right on what I've been saying off of this. The biggest problem, and the reason that we need to default to shall issue, unless there's a big reason the government has to restrict you, is because if they get to decide, oh, well, you were a good little boy, you carry the party line, you carry the government line, we'll let you go ahead and carry a handgun just because you were a good little boy, and you said the government was evil, we don't want you to carry anything. It comes down to a political side of things. Whereas the default being, everybody can get this permit, unless, of course, there is some major, major black stain in there. Domestic violence, convicted felony. The same kind of things that would keep you from buying the gun in the first place. From the Dissociated Press. States with strict gun permitting laws consider next steps. By no author given, so we will just say the Disassociated Press. The U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday struck down a New York state law that had restricted who could obtain a permit to carry a gun in public under the law in place since 1913. New York residents needed to show proper cause or an actual need to carry a concealed handgun for public or in public rather for self-defense. The justices said the law conflicts with the Second Amendment's right to keep and bear arms. It drew swift reaction from the New York Governor Kathy Hochul. We'll be talking about her in just a moment. A Democrat who called the decision reckless, and she said she was prepared to call the legislature back into session to form a response. We do not need people entering our subways, our restaurants, and movie theaters with concealable weapons, she said. We do not need more guns in our streets. New York and half a dozen other states with similar laws now must decide their next steps. As with New York, California, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Rhode Island all have legislatures controlled by Democrats who could propose measures to ensure guns will not be allowed in certain places. Let's see. California, the court's ruling invalidated the good cause requirement in California's permitting law and says the state's attorney general and gun owners' rights groups. AG Rob Bonta said other aspects of California's law remain untouched. Bonta and California lawmakers scrambled Thursday to amend pending legislation that lawmakers will consider next week in hopes of quickly sending it to Gavin Newsom. Their changes included a requirement to assess a concealed carry applicant's potential for danger by examining arrest records, criminal convictions, and restraining orders. The state will require background checks, including with fingerprinting, as well as firearms training and mental health assessment. Two of these things violate the fourth. Many of their precautions are already allowed under current law. It will also ban concealed weapons in certain sensitive areas, such as parks, amusement parks, and sporting venues. Hawaii. So strict, Attorney Alan Beck, that Hawaii essentially bans carrying guns outside the home. It's been practically impossible to get a permit to carry a loaded gun in public, he said. In the past 22 years, there have been 4 permits issued in Hawaii, said Beck, who represents various residents challenging Hawaii gun laws. The state's AG has argued it's not a flat-out ban because people can carry firearms if they have good cause. Maryland, under current law, a gun owner in Maryland has to show good or substantial reason to carry a concealed gun. That could include showing a person's life is in danger from threats or that they work in a job that could put them in contact with people who are dangerous. Maryland AG Brian Frosch said the law is similar to New York's, but they take a different approach. He said that he was examining today's ruling to determine the impact on the state. Mass. Talked about that one already. And we see New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, all in similar boats here. So, yeah, they're coming back here trying to figure out, okay, what do we do now? Yeah, if only murder was illegal. You're right, Arvold. Why don't we just pass a law that makes murder illegal? Then we won't have to worry about any of this. From Politico. California moves to fortify concealed carry limits after High Court invalidates good cause rule. We'll just touch on this briefly. Within hours of the court's decision to strike down New York's rules, Democrat AG Rob Bonta and state lawmakers announced legislation that would bar concealed firearms in places like courthouses and schools and require applicants to undergo assessments for whether they are dangerous to others, which could include checking for criminal records and restraining orders. Lawmakers said they hoped to move the bill through the legislature and to Governor Gavin Newsom's desk as quickly as possible. I would love to see this assessment. I would love to see this assessment because I want to see if there's any indication that would have a political bent. Do you currently accept the current government in its form? Have you ever thought about a revolution? Have you ever carried a Gadsden flag? I won't have to go dig in that and see if I can't find that application. From The Blaze, in our series of Every Other Article is The Blaze, VP Harris claims SCOTUS 2A decision defies the Constitution. Oh, this will be good. Is there video of this? No, there's not video of this. I was hoping. From Courtney Wheel. On Thursday, the Supreme Court of the United States struck down a New York state law which had prohibited applicants from receiving a concealed weapons permit without first demonstrating proper cause. Vice President Harris has since responded to the ruling, saying that it defies common sense and the Constitution. In her opening remarks to a convocation of state attorneys general, Harris, former AG of California, stated that she and President Biden are deeply concerned and troubled by the Supreme Court's ruling, which she also claimed defies logic. Later in the speech, Harris reiterated the singular role that the state AGs play in securing fundamental rights and freedoms, and identified abortion as an example of a right that's currently in dire need of protection. About the attorneys general in the audience, Harris says, We're specifically going to talk about an extension of their responsibilities, which has to do with the responsibility to concern themselves with the priority of ensuring the health, safety, and well-being of the women in their state and protection of their reproductive rights and freedoms. The language and tone she used in her discussion of abortion contrasted starkly with the language and tone she used in the discussion of the SCOTUS decision. She even seemed to express frustration that the Supreme Court affirmed the Second Amendment for the people. After referencing the massacre in Buffalo and Uvalde, Harris says, We can go down the list about why it, yet again, is out on the front pages, so to speak, of the concerns of American people about whether we can and what we have a responsibility to do in terms of reasonable gun safety laws. SCOTUS did not agree that the New York State gun law requiring proper cause to be a reasonable gun safety law. So, Harris is against this, and she's going to tell you about it. Let's talk about Governor Hochul. This was funny. You know what? Let's just listen to it. That seems like a better way to do this.
And I'm sorry this dark day has come. That we're supposed to go back to what was in place since 1788 when the Constitution of the United States of America was ratified. And I would like to point out to the Supreme Court justices that the only weapons at the time were muskets. I'm prepared to go back to muskets. I don't think they envision the high-capacity assault weapon magazines intended for battlefields as being covered from it, but I guess we're just going to have to disagree.
Well, see, Empress Hochul, what you don't seem to understand about this is the fact that muskets, so-called, were battlefield weapons at the time. In fact, it was the musket that kicked a tyrannical government and tyrannical governors out of these 13 colonies, if you'll recall. Furthermore, okay, let's say that we want to go back, okay, to 18th century laws. I gotta point this out to you guys here. Do we want to go back to all 18th century laws, or do we just want to go back to 18th century laws that are convenient for Kathy Hochul? I mean, we all know the answer to that question, but let's think about who wasn't considered a person under 18th century law. See, this is a dangerous road you're going down. And if you follow it to its logical conclusion, well, we never have to hear from Kathy Hochul again because, you know, this one thing changed in the early 20th century. Started with a 1 and ended with a 9. And my former co-hosts think it was the biggest mistake in history. But if that were the case, we wouldn't have to hear from Kathy Hochul anymore. I know a lot of people were bringing out the fact that if we were going back to 18th century laws, we would we wouldn't have to see her because of the camera. No, it wouldn't be because of the camera. It would be because of something else. Furthermore, my other question to hear from Kathy Hochul, and I got to ask this question here, is now you have private security that follows you around everywhere you go. Some of it's government funded, some of it's funded out of your own pocket. But you have a series of bodyguards that follow you. Are they restricted to muskets as well? I'm pretty sure we all know the answer to that as well. From the Blaze, again, Supreme Court lawyer says it would be weird for the High Court to leave abortion up to states after it just imposed the constitutional right to concealed carry of firearms. From Alex Nitzberg. There we go. Neil Katyal, who described himself as a Supreme Court lawyer, tweeted that it would be very weird if the Supreme Court ends a constitutional right to obtain an abortion next week. Except there's no constitutional right to obtain an abortion, saying it should be left to the states to decide right after he just imposed a constitutional right to concealed carry of firearms, saying it cannot be left to the states to decide. Katyal is a law professor and author, has argued cases before the Supreme Court, and has previously served as an acting Solicitor General of the U.S. In a gun-related ruling released on Thursday, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote in the opinion because the state of New York issues public carry licenses only when applicant demonstrates special need of self-defense, we conclude the state's licensing regime violates the Constitution. A leaked Supreme Court draft majority opinion has indicated that the High Court is poised to strike down Roe v. Wade, a move that would enable states to ban abortion. Supreme Court watchers have been awaiting the release of the official ruling to find out if it is in line with the leaked draft. The Constitution does not prohibit the citizens of each state from regulating or prohibiting abortion. Roe and Casey arrogated that authority. We now overrule those decisions and return that authority to the people and their elected representatives, the leaked draft opinion reads. In response to Katyal's comments, numerous commentators pointed out that while the Constitution includes the right to bear arms, it says zilch about abortion. The right to bear arms is in the Constitution, the right to an abortion is not. So this might explain the weirdness, Dinesh D'Souza tweeted. No, because the right to keep and bear arms is actually in the Constitution, abortion is not, which is the point, Kurt Schlichter tweeted. It's only weird, my friend, if one disregards the existence of the Constitution, of the right to keep and bear arms, and the non-existence in the text of the right to an elective abortion, law professor Rick Garnett tweeted. I adore you, Rick, and I think we can disagree about this reasonably. There's no right to concealed carrying of firearms in the text of the Second Amendment. Even guns in the home is not in the text, let alone concealed carrying. And if we are just going by the text, there is, of course, no right privacy in that text or right to travel. Katyal responded across a series of 2 tweets. Here is the reality. There is no right to an abortion in the Constitution. Furthermore, the leaked draft decision for the Roe decision has indicated that it should not be in the purview of the judiciary to decide whether or not this is a thing. Now, that doesn't mean that this has to be at a state level. But at the default, until it's decided at a federal level, it does get kicked back to the states. That's the default position for it, is that it gets kicked back to the states. But they said that the representation of the people should be the ones who decided that, which is Congress, the House of Representatives, and unfortunately, technically, the Senate as well. But that's who makes the decision off that. Yes, it would be absolutely legal under the way the draft decision is written for Congress to come together and make this decision on whether this was a legal practice or an illegal practice. But it only defaults to the states. Until such time as that is changed. However, the explicit right to keep and bear arms, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the preservation of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It says it right there. So, that is what we see off of that. Let's grab one from the Daily Wire. Olbermann had his bad take off of this one. Keith Olbermann proposes drastic solution after SCOTUS New York gun ruling. Unfortunately, there's no video, so we don't get to see him melting down over this. From Virginia Kruta, Keith Olbermann suggested on Thursday that the Supreme Court's decision striking down a New York gun control measure was grounds for dissolving the body entirely. Olbermann argued in a series of tweets that in addition to dissolving the nation's highest court, the state should ignore the decision handed down in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen, which held the New York law restricting the concealed carry permits violated the 14th Amendment in addition to the spirit of the Second Amendment. It has become necessary to dissolve the Supreme Court of the United States. The first step is for a state the court has now forced guns upon to ignore the ruling. Great, you're a court? Why and how do you think you can enforce your rulings? Hashtag ignore the court. All right. Earmuffs. Those of you who have the kids in the room, earmuffs time. Because this is a quote from Olbermann. This is not my words. Because you know I've been trying to be careful about this. Also, fuck Alito, Thomas, Roberts, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and that paralegal, Coney Barrett. Which is insanely sexist, the fact that he can call 5 of them, the men, justices, and the lady has to be the paralegal. Olbermann proceeded to mock the court, suggesting that as an institution, it has no power to enforce any ruling handed down. Hey, SCOTUS! Let's send the SCOTUS army here to enforce your ruling. You, House of Lords radicals pretending to be a court, he said. Critics were quick to respond to Olbermann, accusing him of calling for a rebellion and suggesting that the entire system should be scrapped over a decision he didn't like. Dude, I hope they have the same energy when Roe goes down. I really do. It's a federal offense to incite a rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, Marco Rubio tweeted. Call for a rebellion against federal authority and destruction of a key institution of American government, and Dobbs hasn't even been handed down yet, Rich Lowry added. Actor Adam Baldwin chimed in with a Jeopardy-themed crack. Seditious incitement to insurrection for 200, please. Yeah, I don't know that it's a incitement to insurrection, but he's dangerously close to the line. Like, he's stepping across that line like it's a tightrope. But that's what we see from Olbermann. From The Blaze. Amid leftist uproar over gun ruling, Democrat strategists describe Supreme Court justices as mass shooters. And I quote tweeted this and said that this is going to be the dumbest tweet you have seen today. And if, by the way, you think I'm wrong about that, please share the dumbest one. Not because I doubt you, just because I want the entertainment. From Alex Nitzberg. Self-described Democratic strategist and consultant Adam Parkomenko issued a tweet on Thursday in which he apparently described some members of the U.S. Supreme Court as mass shooters. Sometimes mass shooters wear robes and don't have a gun, Parkomenko tweeted after a release of a gun-related Supreme Court opinion. Because the state of New York issues public carry licenses only when an applicant demonstrates a special need for self-defense. Yeah, we've read the decision. Social Distance Champion quote tweets us and says, I see we've made the leap to accusing Supreme Court justices as murderers. Yeah, I didn't think it was going to take long for that. Yeah, Arvold, I saw that yesterday too. Let me see if I can find my tweet on that so we can see Arvold's response to it. I mean, even I was offended by that. And I have no shame. It takes a lot to get me there. No, I don't know if I can scroll back far enough. I'm too deep into bad takes. Horrible takes. But yeah, Arvold, mass shooters wearing robes. We've got to the Catholic priest part of this. As a general rule, I don't ever say that people who haven't ever mass shot are mass shooters, someone else tweeted. You should be ashamed of yourself for saying something like this. Did you actually read the whole opinion? Narrow in scope. Be an adult and do your research. Dems are children, another tweet replied. So yes, they're taking this well. From Twitchy. From Sam Janney. Which I don't typically, like I said, I don't typically use Twitchy because it's not green check verified. But I know Sam Janney and I know that she's trustworthy. You mad, bro? Biden hilariously mocked and mocked more for his statement on how unhappy he is with SCOTUS gun ruling. From Sam Janney. Let's not pretend Biden knows what day it is, let alone how the SCOTUS ruled on guns today, but we'll play along and pretend Sleepy Joe actually wrote this. Take a gander. Let's bring this up here. Charlie Spearing. Joe Biden not happy with Supreme Court ruling on guns. This ruling contradicts both common sense and the Constitution. Statement. I'm deeply disappointed by the Supreme Court's ruling on New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen. Since 1911, which I would like to have one of those, the state of New York has required individuals who would like to carry a concealed weapon in public to show a need to do so for the purpose of self-defense and to acquire a license. More than a century later, the U.S. Supreme Court has chosen to strike down New York's long-established authority to protect its citizens. This ruling contradicts both common sense and the Constitution, and it should deeply trouble us all, man. Come on. In the wake of horrific acts in Buffalo and Uvalde, as well as the daily acts of gun violence, that do not make national headlines. Chicago, Baltimore. We must do more as a society, not less, to protect our fellow Americans. My fellow American. I remain committed to doing everything in my power to reduce gun violence and make our communities safer. I've already taken more executive actions to reduce gun violence than any other president during his first year in office. Not the flex that you think it is, by the way. And I'll continue to do all that I can do to protect Americans from gun violence. I urge states to continue to enact and enforce common sense laws to make their citizens and communities safer from gun violence. As the late Justice Scalia recognized, the Second Amendment is not absolute. Yeah, they keep trying to push that bull crap down your throat too. For centuries, states have regulated who may purchase or possess weapons, the types of weapons they may use, and the places they may carry those weapons. And the courts have upheld those regulations, man. Come on, man. I call on Americans across the country to make their voices heard on gun safety. Lives are on the line, man. Creepy Uncle Joe is unhappy. This ruling doesn't contradict the Constitution. And come on, Biden, or whoever wrote this. Wouldn't know common sense if it fell out of the sky, it landed on his or their face and started to wiggle. Nobody is all that impressed. Obama, Rice, Klain. Mike out yonder says, Biden couldn't even finish reading that. Too many big words. His team is very unhappy for sure. As if Biden even knows what's in the Constitution. Nobody's listening to that window liquor, rather. Joe47 says, I would love for the president to tell me which mass shooter had a concealed carry permit or how many concealed carry Americans have stopped crimes. The classic FJB. And the picture of Hunter Biden's form that he lied on. So, there you go. The president, everybody. Let's see. From the Blaze, DOJ and Garland slammed for expressing dissent with SCOTUS ruling on guns. Thankfully, he just does so from the DOJ and not from the Supreme Court. Review. What does the DOJ say? In a statement released by an agency spokeswoman, Dane Iverson, the DOJ stated disagreement with New York's law, that New York's law violated the Second Amendment. We respectfully disagree with the court's conclusion that the Second Amendment forbids New York's reasonable requirement that individuals seeking to carry a concealed handgun must show that they need to do so for self-defense. The DOJ remains committed to saving innocent lives by enforcing and defending federal firearms laws, partnering with state, local, and tribal authorities, and using all legally available tools to tackle the epidemic of gun violence plaguing the community. The statement drew various critiques. Some people expressed gratitude that in light of the statement, A.G. Garland never made it to the Supreme Court, while others noted the statement is more evidence of the Justice Department's increasing politicization. Yes, by the way. This guy is just trying to get people killed. How can you beat an active shooter? What to do that could save your life? Coming up at 5 p.m. Okay, how do you beat an active shooter? Shoot back. But let's see what they have to show. Let's see what they think is how you beat an active shooter.
3.
Go. Hit. Clear the weapon. Keep going. Smash his head into the ground. Grab the side of his head. Good.
3.
Go. Hit. Clear the weapon. Keep going. Smash his head into the ground. Grab the side of his head. Good.
3.
Go.
Dude, somebody's gonna die. with that. Don't do that. Whatever that is, don't do that. The View, as usual, has another bad take from Anna Navarro.
So what to me this decision is tone deaf.
Yeah.
To the very American epidemic and reality we are living. Yeah. We are in a state where just a month ago, there was a mass shooting at a supermarket where people are not safe. We are at a time in American politics where the pressure and the outrage by Americans, the majority of Americans, is such that we're finally seeing bipartisan movement in the Senate on crafting a gun reform legislation. This is a victory for the NRA.
And it's always the NRA. It's a victory for the American people. And again, with people like Navarro, if you want people to give up their armaments, is your private security going to give up their armaments? But in the midst of all this happening, from CBS, Senate passes the most significant gun control legislation in decades. From Melissa Quinn, the Senate voted 65 to 33 on Thursday to pass the bipartisan gun control bill, the most significant legislation addressing guns in nearly 30 years. John Cornyn of Texas, who led the negotiations along with Chris Murphy of Connecticut, said on the floor Thursday that legislation responds to the shootings last month at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York, and at an elementary school in Uvalde that left a combined 31 people dead, including 19 children, in a positive and affirmative way. But no, you're seeing this now and you're thinking to yourself, but Ed, how could this pass 65 to 33? Republicans are in our favor. They're in our corner. They want expanded gun rights for people. Republicans are the good guys. But there are only 50 Democrats. How could it be 65 to 33? They fooled you. They fooled you. I don't believe in doing nothing in the face of what we saw in Uvalde, and we've seen far too many communities, Cornyn said. Doing nothing is an abdication of our responsibility as representatives of the American people here in the U.S. in the Senate. The bill will now be sent to the House, where Pelosi has vowed to take it up swiftly. Though Minority Leader McCarthy has been urging Republicans to vote against the bill, it's expected to pass the Democrat-controlled House. First thing tomorrow morning, the Rules Committee will meet in it to advance this life-saving legislation to the floor, Pelosi said in a statement on Thursday night. Although the bill does not represent all the gun control measures that Brandon has called for, he is expected to sign the bill. What is in this? In a statement released after the vote, Mr. Biden called on the House to promptly vote on this bipartisan bill and send it to my desk. Tonight, after 28 years of inaction, bipartisan members, no, it's partisan, it's just the mono party. Members of Congress have come together to heed the call of families across the country and pass legislation to address the scourge of gun violence in our communities, he said. Families in Uvalde and Buffalo, too many tragic shootings before have demanded action, and tonight we acted, man. Come on. Republicans who voted for the bill are Roy Blunt, Richard Burr, Shelley Moore Capito. I don't do this. I don't know why I'm doing this now, because I usually don't do this. But we're halfway through the list already. Bill Cassidy, Susan Collins, John Cornyn, Joni Ernst, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, Lisa Murkowski, Rob Portman, Mitt Romney, Tom Tillis, Pat Toomey, and Todd Young. Vote them all out. McConnell says the Senate's passage of legislation, as well as the Supreme Court's striking down a New York gun law earlier Thursday made for 2 landmark victories. I'm proud of these 2 complementary victories that will make our country freer and safer at the same time. Law-abiding Americans will go to bed tonight with significantly stronger Second Amendment rights than they had this morning. No, they will not. While new common-sense guardrails around convicted criminals and mental illness are now on their way to becoming law. Chuck U. Schumer tweeted that he's pleased with finally taking meaningful action on guns for the first time in nearly 30 years to keep communities safe. The legislation enhances background checks for prospective gun buyers under 21 years old, which violates the 14th Amendment, closes the so-called boyfriend loophole, clarifies the definition of a federally licensed firearms dealer, and creates criminal penalties for straw purchases and gun trafficking, which are already illegal. It also provides $750 million in grants to incentivize states to implement crisis intervention programs and provides roughly billions of dollars in federal funding to bolster mental health services for children and families and harden schools. So it was a pork handout. These people are not on your side. None of these people are on your side. You know who isn't being prevented from getting guns? From Forbes. The IRS has 4,500 guns, 5 million rounds, ammunition, paying taxes. From Robert Wood. The IRS is a very hard job to do, especially now, but you might wonder about the IRS inventory of weapons. An official report says at the end of 2017, the tax agency had 4,487 guns, and 5,062,006 rounds of ammunition in its weapons inventory. So says this report published by the Government Accountability Office. The IRS isn't the only agency with guns, of course. Many federal agencies are reviewed and assessed in the GAO study. With this not exactly page-turning title, Purchases and Inventory Controls of Firearms, Ammunition, and Tactile Equipment, it was also noted the influential tax professor blog, some of the guns the IRS has are not for the faint of heart, including new fully automatic guns. Yes, those are machine guns. Only the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS gets to carry guns. Compared to seeing gun-toting IRS agents at your door, a correspondence audit doesn't sound so bad. One old audit report from the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration covering the 09 to 11 said the IRS agents accidentally discharged their guns 11 times during that time. That may not be a perfect safety record, although given the size of the IRS, it doesn't sound too bad. Boy, that sentence was just riddled with problems. Interesting, the old TIGTA report also says the IRS agents fired their guns accidentally more times than they did intentionally. Some of the misfires caused property damage or personal injury. A few defendants in criminal tax cases have tried to suppress evidence based on the IRS carrying guns. In U.S. v. Adams, the First Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed Charles Adams' conviction for conspiracy to defraud the U.S. by obstructing payroll tax collections and tax evasion. Mr. Adams was convicted despite his argument the IRS agents carrying guns was not allowed by law. Mr. Adams was essentially treated as a tax protester, which is clearly a pejorative term. Even so, he isn't the first taxpayer to be unhappy about the IRS having weapons. Yeah, I've got a pretty big problem with that too, actually. And I'm willing to say that on the record. You hear that, Bezos? You hear that, Susan? I'm on your platforms. I'm saying, I have a problem with the IRS carrying weapons. And you should too. I'm going to skip the January 6th stuff, because we're up on the clock. And we still have to do live chat, by the way, too. I'm sorry. We still get to do live chat. But there are a few that I want to get to yet today before we're out of here. Including the popular one, that was requested yesterday. Just the News, Marjorie Taylor Greene seeks restraining order against Dem staffer who defaced her posters. Corroborated partially by Fox 5 Atlanta. From John Solomon, Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene said Tuesday night she has decided to seek a restraining order against a House Democrat staffer who was captured by Capitol Police on security cameras defacing posters outside her Washington office. Greene told Just the News that she felt like she had no choice but to seek the protective order against Timothy Hyson, the chief of staff to Mass Democrat Rep. Jake Auchincloss, after the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington declined a police request to issue an arrest warrant and charge the staffer. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrat leadership doesn't believe in protecting me, so I have no other choice but to do whatever I can to protect myself and protect my staff, she said during an interview on the Just the News, Not Noise television show. Matt Corradoni, a spokesman for Auchincloss, said Tuesday night that he believed the order was unnecessary because Hyson has no intention of interacting with the Congresswoman. Tim has never had a direct contact with the Congresswoman, nor does he plan to in the future. The order is unnecessary and nothing more than political theater, he said. On Monday, Corradoni confirmed that Hyson had affixed stickers to posters outside Greene's office that declared that there are just two genders, male and female, because he felt the posters' messages were bullying. The spokesman said he did not believe Hyson's actions violated any laws, and that the request to prosecute to file charges in an arrest warrant was ridiculous. Greene said her concerns have been exacerbated by the fact that she has received a total of 60 death threats in 2022, but has been turned down by House leadership for a security detail. And you know what? She probably took them to the House Security Commission and not posted them up on Twitter. Just guessing here. She said that she was spooked when Capitol Police and prosecutors briefed her on what they observed about Hyson when he placed stickers, mostly custom-made religious statements, quoting Bible and criticizing Greene's position on gender, and said she's concerned that Hyson remains allowed to work in the same Longworth office building where she and Auchincloss have offices. I think it is political theater, but I am going to say the shoe on the other foot side of that and say that if this was going the other way, this would be a national headline story. Do I not have the other Marjorie Taylor Greene one? I thought I did. Oh no, I had to close it out because the Daily Mail was doing stupid stuff. Never mind. That's the Daily Mail article that was there. Here's one from The Hill. Biden assessing how to help Afghanistan after the earthquake. Meanwhile, the Afghani people are sitting here. No! No, Mr. Biden. No, you just stay over on that side of the world. No, we've seen what happens when you come to help, Mr. Biden. From Laura Kelly. The White House on Wednesday said that President Biden is working to respond to a devastating earthquake in eastern Afghanistan by assessing how U.S. humanitarian assistance can address immediate needs. At least 1,000 people are believed to have been killed and nearly 1,000 injured after a 5.9 magnitude earthquake hit the country on Tuesday. Both tolls are expected to rise. President Biden is monitoring developments and has directed U.S. aid and other federal government partners to assess U.S. response to options to help those most affected, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said in a statement. Our humanitarian partners are already delivering medical care and shelter supplies on the ground. We are committed to continuing our support for the needs of the Afghan people as we stand with them during and in the aftermath of this terrible tragedy. Meanwhile, the Taliban is probably sitting in Kandahar right now saying, "Oh, Mr. Biden, you want to help us? We could use a few MRAPs, huh? Oh, those nice M16s. I bet you if you sent a few of those over, it would definitely help us with earthquake. A drone, I bet you would help us. A drone would help us a lot, Mr. Biden. Some evil. What do we want to do? What do we want to do? Yeah, because this one's probably going to come out today, so let's talk just a bit about this one here. From the Daily Dot. Got the death sentence today. Woman says her gynecologist wouldn't allow her to get sterilized, suggested IUD instead. From Brandon Biela. A woman on TikTok went viral last week after alleging her gynecologist refused to consider her request for a tubal ligation, a form of sterilization known as getting your tubes tied, instead of suggesting she consider an IUD. TikToker Olivia posted a video on the topic 2 days ago, which she reenacts an interaction she allegedly had with her gyno. The video currently has 1.5 million views. 1.5 million and one. Let's listen. Maybe. This might not go because of the ad blocker. And the fact it's TikTok, so it's spam. But we have the transcript at least. Hi, Mrs. Gynecologist. My name is Olivia. I never want children. I've made up my mind since I was old enough to think of the concept. Can I please have my tubes tied? She starts in her video. No, the gynecologist character responds. It's permanent. Yeah, I know, Olivia states. That's why I asked. I'd like that option. Well, no, you might meet Mr. Right and change your mind, the gyno character says. No, it's not my plan. It's not my 5-year plan. It's not my 10-year plan, my 50-year plan. I don't want that, the TikToker answers. Yeah, but you might change your mind. It's permanent. So here's a brochure for an IUD, the gyno character responds. Olivia then holds up a brochure for an IUD allegedly given to her by her gynecologist. In comments, users pointed out the hypocrisy of giving this advice for not wanting children, yet not offering the same advice to those who want kids. We don't tell people who want kids that they'll change their mind, so why is it okay for them to tell us that we'll change our mind, one user asked. Seriously, I don't care if other people have kids, I just don't want them for myself, Olivia responded. In another comment she added, if I change my mind, I'll adopt. There's so many kids sitting in our shitty foster system waiting to be adopted. So, there are a couple sides to this. Now, if she thinks that she's sure that she doesn't want to have kids, then this would be the regular, the way to go about this. But as the gyno pointed out, if this is an actual interaction that happened, that is a very, very permanent step that cannot be, well, it can be reversed, but it's very difficult to do so. And one of the things that the gyno is probably looking at in saying no to this is the fact that in our litigious society, our heavily litigious society, coming down the road when this girl does change her mind, if she does change her mind, there is the possibility of suing for medical malpractice. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of that with the transgender thing and the transgender surgery. Oh, there's no way that I could have made up my mind at this young age. Why did you let me go through with this? It's permanent. I do think that this person probably should have her tubes tied, but that's between her and her doctor. From The Nation. Abortion involves killing, and that's okay. From Sophie Lewis. Yes, this is a real article. This is not satire. In 2019, I published a kind of manifesto, Full Surrogacy Now, whose opening line is, "It's a wonder we let fetuses inside us." Well, that's the way that mammalian species have reproduced for 1.5 billion years. The opening pages are entirely given over to my extended paean to the process of gestating in all its shockingly grisly biology, its everyday sublimity, whereas in other species, female can often discard or expel a pregnancy at will. In our species, a hyper-invasive placenta puts the gestator at risk of lethal hemorrhage. Locked down, our body becomes a daredevil participant in a wrestling match or similar extreme sport. We cannot easily quit. Boy, if it was really that dangerous, you would think that we would not be overcrowded as the people in the Bill Gates Foundation would like us to believe that we are. From the starting point, I make a case for rethinking human gestation as real and currently often deadly dangerous labor, deserving of maximal support. The controversial part is that a key correlate of viewing gestating as labor is that forcing someone to gestate against their will is forced labor. You could just not have sex. Furthermore, if the labor of pregnancy is productive of life, then interrupting that labor is logically speaking productive of death. Rather than shy away from this, I believe we should embrace it as part of an effort to give gestating the respect it deserves. In the intervening years since publishing my book, I've received dozens of reports of women who experienced the ideas in it as deeply salutary during pregnancy. Strangers have sent me photos of full surrogacy, not lying face down in a maternity ward. By the same token, I had drawn on heterodox pregnancy memoirs to bolster my claims. Never in my life have I felt more pro-choice than when I was pregnant, Maggie Nelson had written in the Argonauts in 2015. And never in my life have I understood more thoroughly, and I've been more excited about a life that began at conception. Feminists may never make a bumper sticker that says it's a choice and a child, but of course, that's what it takes, and we know it. We're not idiots. We understand the stakes. Sometimes we choose death. Harry and I sometimes joke that women should get way beyond 20 weeks, maybe even up to 2 days after birth, to decide if they want to keep the baby. I agree with Nelson. There's something infantilizing about denying the fact that embryos die when we scrape them out of bodies of which they are a part. It sentimentalizes pregnant or potentially pregnant humans as fundamentally nonviolent creatures to imply that we can't handle the truth about what we are up to when we opt out. And it patronizes abortion getters to insist that we're only making a healthcare choice rather than also extinguishing a future child. How did this make it to print? In my view, recognizing that gestating manufactures a proto-person requires acknowledgement that abortion kills a proto-person. A baby is completely dependent on human care in order to stay alive, but its needs could be filled by any person, whereas a fetus, a proto-person, is ineluctably, I've never seen that word before, dependent on a specific person. We humans do kill when necessary, victims of assaults, sometimes kill in self-defense, targets of persecution, sometimes kill for justice, or to reduce the number of the persecutors. And the colonized sometimes kill for liberation. Mothers living in unspeakable conditions, including chattel slavery, have been documented to kill their children as an act of mercy. Of course, those examples are instances of necessary violence generated by the conditions for which we struggle to render extinct. When it comes to abortions, it seems possible that the conditions that necessitate them may never be wholly eliminated. Even if vasectomies become generalized and perfected genetic technologies become universally accessible, as long as people are performing pregnancy on this earth, they must be free to change their minds about seeing it through. The adoption industry could be revolutionized and child welfare lavishly subsidized. Regardless of the available supports, no one should be pregnant involuntarily. The science of medicine dictates that when foreign organisms inhabit the human body unwelcomely, we tend to eject them. We have breaking news. Hold on. Let's see. Roe has been overturned. Three minutes ago. Well, this changes the course of the rest of the program. Supreme Court overturns Roe, states can ban abortion. From Mark Sherman of the Associated Press. The Supreme Court has ended the constitutional protections for abortion that have been in place for nearly 50 years in a decision by its conservative majority to overturn Roe v. Wade. Friday's outcome is expected to lead to abortion bans in roughly half the states. The decision, unthinkable just a few years ago, was the culmination of decades of efforts by abortion opponents, made possible by an emboldenment right side of the court that's been fortified. Oh my God, the opinion piece on this already. By three appointees of former President Trump. The ruling came more than a month after the stunning leak draft of a draft opinion by Justice Alito, indicating the court was prepared to take this momentous step. It puts the courts at odds with the majority of Americans who favored preserving Roe, according to opinion polls. Alito, in the final opinion issued on Friday, wrote that Roe and Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision that reaffirmed the rights to abortion were wrong the day they were decided and must be overturned. Authority to regulate abortion rests with the political branches, not the courts, Alito wrote. Joining Alito were Justices Thomas, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. The latter three justices are Trump appointees. Thomas first voted to overrule Roe 30 years ago. Roberts would have stopped short of ending the abortion right, noting that he would have upheld the Mississippi law at the heart of the case, a ban on abortion after 15 weeks, and said no more. Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan, the diminished liberal wing of the court, were in dissent, because of course they were. Yeah, but Randy, those are the big empty states, so there are no people there. All that matters is California and New York. The ruling is expected to disproportionately affect minority women who already face limited access to health care, according to statistics analyzed by the Associated Press. 13 states, mainly in South and Midwest, already have laws on the books that ban abortion in the event that Roe is overturned. Another half dozen states have near total bans or prohibitions after 6 weeks of pregnancy, before many women know they're even pregnant. In roughly a half dozen other states, the fight will be over dormant abortion bans that were enacted before Roe was decided in 1973, or new proposals to sharply limit when abortions can be performed, according to Guttmacher Institute, a research group that supports abortion rights. More than 90% of abortions take place in the first 13 weeks of pregnancy, and more than half are now done with pills, not surgery, according to data compiled by Guttmacher. The decision came against a backdrop of opinion that surveys that find that the majority of Americans oppose overturning Roe and handing the question of whether to permit abortion entirely to the states. Polls conducted by the Associated Press, Norwick Center for Public Affairs Research, and others have also consistently shown about 1 in 10 Americans want abortion illegal in all cases. A majority are in favor of abortion being legal in all or most current circumstances, but polls indicate that many also support restrictions, especially later in pregnancy. Well, if you live anywhere near a PP right now, arm up. This is about to get interesting. By early summer, Kennedy had retired. Let's see. Yeah, now they talk about changing the composition. In his draft, Alito dismissed the arguments in favor of retaining the two decisions, including that multiple generations of American women have partly relied on the right to abortion to gain economic and political power. Changing the composition of the courts has been central to the anti-abortion side strategy. Mississippi and its allies made increasingly aggressive arguments as the case developed, and the two high court defenders of abortion rights retired or died. The state initially argued that its law could be upheld without overturning the court's abortion precedents. Then Governor Phil Bryant signed the 15-week measures into law in March of 2018 when Justices Anthony Kennedy and Ruth Bader Ginsburg were still members of a 5-justice majority that was mainly protective of abortion rights. By early summer, Kennedy had retired and was replaced by Kavanaugh. A few months later, the Mississippi law was blocked in federal courts. But the state always was headed to the nation's highest court. It didn't even ask for a hearing before a 3-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit, which ultimately held the law was invalid in December of 2019. By early September 2020, the Supreme Court was ready to consider the state's appeal. The court scheduled for the case for considering the justices' private conference on September 29th, but in the intervening weeks, Ginsburg died and Barrett was quickly nominated and confirmed without a single Democrat vote. Oh man, this is going to get interesting in a hurry. Oh boy, this changes a lot of things politically right now. You thought the meltdown yesterday was a meltdown? Good God. We might see an insurrection yet today, you guys. All right, but we are out of time right now. So we do have to come back and check out what's happening over here with you guys here. But man, the ability to get this breaking right now, on air, while we're going, thank you, Arbolt and Ben Wild for that. But we've got to get this started. So, Randy got the first messages in here. Let's go down to what we have up on the screen before we move on into what's on the sheet of paper here. Randy says, good morning, fellow Ed Heads. Quest Fanning says, God Morgan. Like Morgan Freeman and Bruce Almighty, that God Morgan. Gaines is here. Good morning, Randy, and everyone else. Quest Fanning says he might be dredging the lake soon. Let's see what happened throughout the week. On Monday, Ron Helton, Frank Frijoles, Quest Fanning, 80s Kid. Chilaga 1984, Spartan 0000 Superior 1. Goats and Scarves, and Randy Crush Saga. On Tuesday, Quest Fanning, Ron Helton, Harvey McLeod, Sully Blue, 80s Kid, Major Victory, Elpira with 4 A's, Arbolt, Randy Crush Saga, and Vampire Hunter D. Wednesday, Ron Helton, Quest Fanning, Job for 9, Frank Frijoles, Set of a Cantus Bear, Randy Crush Saga, Arvolt, 80s Kid, and Nephilim Ninja of Nibiru. Yesterday, Quest Fanning, Ron Helton, Spartan 0000 Superior 1, Arvolt, Horatius, Frank Frijoles, Job for 9, Valiant Thor joined us over on the YouTube side. That was a new name, so thanks for coming and joining us. Randy Crush Saga and Legit Ghost Sniper came in and joined us here today. We've said hi to A Gaines P. We've said hi to Randy Crush Saga. We've said hi to Quest Fanning and Quest Fanning's alter ego. I'm kind of okay with saying certain places have restrictions on firearms, like the individual building level, as the conservative SCOTUSs have indicated. The downside looks huge for folks that always see only crimes committed with guns and never the more common defensive use of guns. I got some Stardew music to go with this. No, I think that's Kirby music, actually. Not Stardew. They have Stardew music on the rotation now. Randy says, to the window, to the walls. Ron Helton is here. Ben Wild is here, law-abiding citizen checking in. Check in, good sir. I'll say it, Joey Poopy Pants and Cackle Puss are not good people, and they barely underwear stains. Apparently Helton's got the coof. Ben Wild says, Maryland is a May issue state too. Not anymore, it's not. They're sideways about all of this saying, increase CCW to law-abiding citizens. And by the way, Maryland CCW background requirements are insane. Will increase gun violence in Baltimore. I mean, they're sort of right, because now you can shoot back. Ron Helton says our natural right to defend ourselves should be reviewed by nobody. Those who would carry and shoot others is already happening. How is it going to be any less safe? Those gangbangers don't care about laws. Arvolt says, if only murder was illegal. I mean, they finally made lynching illegal. Randy says, maybe if they just had one more gun law. Just one more. Ben Wild says, so as a former law enforcement officer that you know actually put crap people in prison, mostly for bank fraud and securities violations, I was allowed to carry a firearm because you know those jackasses got out of jail. Maryland did not deem that as good enough and substantial, and I'm also a freaking firearm trainer, although we consider it people. Ron says, I can't wait to see the New York cops carrying muskets. I think they would be allowed flintlock. Ron says, reload so we can shoot those bad guys with semi-autos. Disavow. Quest says, cannons on privateer ships were legal. Randy says, just a shame there weren't other writings from the Founding Fathers to elaborate their thoughts regarding the Second Amendment. Ron says, it's plainly obvious the Second Amendment is to defend against tyranny. Too bad most Americans forgot that lesson. Quest says, regardless of court ruling, she should lead by example. Relegate her security anyways. Ben says, he was a postmaster, obviously an expert on the Second Amendment. Dude, the IG's office for the postmaster has more guns than the IRS does. Quest says, don't you miss when Olbermann's bad takes were limited to sports? I guess I missed those days. Ben says, what does Alec Baldwin know about gun control? He doesn't know enough about muzzle discipline. Sedevacantous Bear is here again. Welcome. Arvolt says, mass shooter and no gun and wear robes. Are we talking about a Catholic priest here? Arvolt says, watch out for those Nigerian twins shouting MAGA country. Ron Helton with his approval for the Democrats. Demon rats. They think only the rich should have protection, with the rest of us and our right to self-preservation. Bumbling crooked Biden. '80s Kid says, Brandon is a lying dog-faced pony soldier. Randy says, it's funny how they point to how long the law that was deemed unlawful has been around as a defense. It actually makes it worse that it lasted this long when it wasn't allowed from the start. Ben says, do these idiots really not understand that the decision doesn't eliminate the CCW permit process? Just that they can't deny a person eligible for a permit on some made-up basis that they don't have a need to carry. No, they don't. I will answer that question. No, they don't. They believe that this means that anybody can just throw a gun in their waistband now, which is what it should have been. Vampire Hunter D is here. Welcome. Ben says these videos are literally the most dangerous thing on the internet. Spartan says slaps the stronger part of the body equals stupid. Ben says, I know language, but F the view. No, you guys can still put the language in there. It's just because I'm competing with the people who listen to AM radio on the way to work, I'm going to try not to say it now. You guys can still say it in the chat. Because I don't want 7-year-old Timmy in the car to be looking up and saying, Daddy, what does mean? He can learn that in elementary school like the rest of us did. Spartan says, epidemic of government PSYOP shootings. Yeah. Spartan, I can't read that one. Ben says, how is this really a victory? A lot of these laws already exist on state level. It just expands to the ATF. Yeah? The IRS should have 0 guns, says Spartan. IRS is pure evil, also says Spartan. Randy says, I missed my timing because I was busy, but I think health inspectors should also carry guns. Ron says, this woman is stupid. She should not have kids. Avoid that idiot. Randy says, Olivia doesn't understand. There was probably a point where women could choose to get their tubes tied, and the vast majority regretted it. Ron says, does she not understand what permanent means? Sex change operations is the same thing. Permanent. Randy says, she probably assumes that interaction is based off misogyny, but they do the same thing to young men who haven't had kids. Ron says, instead of bitching, she can go find another doctor who doesn't give a damn and will do as she asks. Randy says, the nation, shouting the silent part out loud. Spartan says, doctors who did sex change operations should get the death penalty after a fair trial. It's basically torture. Ron says, it's cruel. There should be more stories about those who have done it to warn others. And Arbolt, in the all caps, the abortion ruling just dropped. Awesome, you're going over this topic right now, but breaking news. Yeah, it's official. Sedevacantist, amen. Ave Maria. God bless this moment. Randy says, now remember, they claimed 26 states would ban abortion. The minority, of course. Yes, but remember, well, those are all empty states, and we should, there's more people in California than there is in all 26 of those states combined. Spartan says, I don't care about abortion, but it'll be great to see leftists melt down under Biden. Says now for the states that prevent baby murder to band together with the nation that reject the U.S. LGBT QIRAMIGIXTBYTAY plus to ban investment or business with the enemy. Well, we'll see how violent this gets first. Quest says, now we can expect a summer of violent leftists expressing their love of violence. Sedevacantist Bear says they will treat the red flag laws as the Second Amendment. Yes, and Spartan says yes with that too. I want to just touch on the abortion thing for just a moment, just to talk about how we got here before we sign out of here for the day. Now, one of the things to note about what we're seeing here, what we're doing here, and what goes on with this is the fact of, they say that this was a carefully crafted way to bring this forward from the Supreme Court, to get the Supreme Court to change, to finish their Catholic agenda for everything else. And I don't believe that's the case. I look at this right now, and I look at what was coming while we were getting into this position. especially with Kennedy passing away. And while the entire world was shifting, and while the makeup of the court was shifting and everything else off of this, while we were in the process of this, the ideas of safe and legal and rare changed. It used to be not that long ago, in my adult lifetime, where if you got an abortion, you didn't talk about it. It was a shame. You were ashamed of it. It wasn't this, you went out there and then you went and bragged to your friends about it. And I would even go as far as the way to say, and I know that that's going to be the next argument that's coming out of the right is, oh, well, they're going to go ban birth control. No, I'm telling you right now, that's going to be a wildly unpopular thing, and that will cost Republicans in the midterms if they go after birth control next. But, you know, at some point, even before I got politically active, I started to notice the promiscuity and the throwaway of life was already started. There were bars in the South and spring break towns that said, hey, you probably need a drink and a pick-me-up. Half off your drinks if you bring in proof of a receipt of a Plan B purchase. And I think that's really where that started. I think that was in 2010 when I saw that for the first time. But it's gone up from there. It's gone from, okay, I was really careful, but something happened and I don't talk about it anymore, to I'm just going out there to have sex so I can have the abortion. And that's where I think that it changed. You know, Michelle Wolf getting up into the costume and saying, "Shout your abortion!" I think was a big leading factor to this. The left in this country thought that they had the mandate forever, and they overstretched, and they took it away from being a possible medical treatment for an accident happening to a rite of passage. And that's what emboldened the people who saw it as baby killing to get to this point that we're at. The left dared the right, and the right said, okay, we'll do it. I think if we'd have stayed in the same mindset that we were in the early 2000s, I don't think we'd be sitting here today with this conversation. Whether you find that good or bad, I will leave that to you to determine, and I'm not going to tell you whether I think that's good or bad. I will leave you to determine that, because you've already got your beliefs on where the practice is. I'm just going to talk to the strategy of it and how we got here. How we got from, it was a mistake, I'm so scared, and I'll never talk about this again, to this article from The Nation that we were reading right when this dropped. Of course it's death and we should embrace it. But that's where we're at right now. We're going to sign off for the day. Grab a couple more of the chats here because you guys are throwing this up at the end. Ron Helton says, all these laws is what happens when you allow government to impose direct taxes. Without direct taxes, we could end the government. Fair. Horatius says, Ron, I'm sure you know, but there's no law saying you have to pay direct taxes, but it's enforced anyway. Schiff proved this, and the government put him in prison till his death. What Schiff? Is it Peter Schiff? Because I know it's not Adam Schiff, because he's a great big tax advocate. I don't know. But that's where we're at right now. Throw the outro up. So, well, in the midst of breaking news as we were going on in the end, which extended the show further than I wanted it to be, we're going to head out of here for the day. Thanks everybody who came by and chatted in the live chat. Stick around if you're over on Twitch, because we're going to go over and rating. I got to throw boots on and get out of here and get out to work. So, thanks everybody. We'll probably have a weekend stream, but I don't know if anybody's going to be paying attention because the protests are going to go back off it here. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll see where this goes, and we'll continue to watch the news and see what's happening with all the stuff that we see going on here. This is going to be an interesting day, an interesting weekend, and probably an interesting summer at this point. So we'll see where this goes. We'll see what we do with this and where we go with that. And we will see you next time over here on Contemporary. And until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care. Ooh, who got gift subs?